we got our mythical, guys. Legendaries 2.0. What is up, everybody? 2+ here, and we've got a little mini shard pull to go on for the 2x on primals. We're going to go ahead and pull what else we got here for the champion chase event. First, so let's check the rewards for this champion chase. Looks like your standard, some energy, a soul stone, a 4-star chicken. You get 100 of the token. No, you get 300 of the pellets tokens, which actually have some pretty good rewards. 100 epic winter relic fragment, 50 mythical relic fragment, a mythical skill tome, and 20 of the plus tier epic fragments. And this won't be all that we pull for this. This is just a short, quick video going over the champion chase and to see if we get anything on out of the first few shards. Let's do a 10 pull on the ancients.
It is champion chase, so you get points per epic, not per shard, which is nice. I prefer those. We got Carolina, which is an interesting champion, not really for this account, but for a mid or early game account, she's pretty nice. Her A1 has a 60% chance of putting the burn out for 2 turns, which a lot of epics, it's only 1 turn, especially on A1. Even some legendaries, it's only 1 turn if it's on A1. Her A2 attacks all enemies. 70% chance of placing the big version decreased attack for 2 turns, and it cannot be resisted if the target's under a burn. The accuracy is not super important, and key part of the point is that the burn does not have to be placed by her, so if someone else is putting out burns, you don't really need her to build with accuracy to land the decreased attack. And then the A3, on a 4-turn cooldown, which is a bit much, but it's an interesting skill. Decrease the duration of all ally debuffs on all allies for 1 turn, then puts a 15% strength on all allies for 2 turns, and the buff is protected, it cannot be removed or stolen. The reason I say that that's interesting is because there's certain buffs that say or debuffs that are like, this debuff cannot be cleansed or removed. Well, this decreases the duration, which bypasses that protection pretty much. So she can do something pretty unique there, that she can manipulate buffs or debuffs that are unable to be removed, that are basically protected. And I'm not even sure of any legendaries that can do that. And then finally, the Pastor. Every time an enemy under HP burn debuff gets a turn, decreases the duration to random buff from that enemy about 1 turn, which is nice to have. She is decent to pair her with an HP burner. And at a 60% chance on a 2-turn HP burn on the A1, it's not that bad even if she's the only one bringing the burn. And irrelevant, but we'll say it anyways, the aura is ally resistance in all battles by 30 off.
Urson, not even really going to go into him. He's food. That's a 4-star chicken right there. Got Odachai or Odachi, whatever you call him. We got the Ordinator, both chickens. Not really expecting much out of this. I know it's not a lot of shards, but you never know.
Cool, we got another Bell Aura. Still one of the top 5 rares in the game, maybe top 3. I personally like him better than Spellhound.
Wait, not Cloak, who is interesting. She's a pretty potent burner for a rare. That's about it, is burns and damage. But she's very competent at her role. Not a fan of Harvester. Doesn't really do anything, a little bit of damage. She can increase the cooldown of 1 target skill by 2 turns. That's about her highlight, which is not that great. Fanatic, low ratings. I have heard some people speak slightly highly of him, but I think they just think he looks cool. Ifrit, not even gonna go into him, that's chicken.
All rares. You got the Amarantine skeleton. Don't even know what he does. That's how unimportant he is. He got a 50-50 chance of putting a block buff for 2 turn on the A1. That's actually a solid A1 for a rare. 50-50 chance on the block buffs. A2 attack 1 enemy, have a 100% chance of block actors heals for 1 turn, and a 80% chance to put a weak version heal reduction for 2 turns. It's only a single target, but if you're needing... I don't want to say you could use them in the arena early game because it's a rare, but you've got block buffs and block active skills right out the gate there, and then you got to increase defense on this champion. It's the whole weak versions, but I could see him getting a little bit of use on very early game arena.
Let's do our sacred shards first, and then we'll do the primals. Oscarel, AoE stun, increased resistance and defense on everybody. A lot of people like him. I'm not a fan, but as you can see, he is highly regarded for faction wars. It ain't for me. I'm not a fan of him. We got Karam, who is, as far as I'm aware, the only instant activator for poisons that's an epic in the game. And he attacks on enemy, instantly activates all poisons on the target for the A3. His A2 attacks on enemy, 15% chance to inflict a critical hit. Damage increases by 50% if this champion has more than 50% HP, but it still doesn't hit that hard. And then attacks one enemy, 50% chance of putting a 5% poison for 2 turns. So he only brings 1 poison himself, but if you don't have any poison activators, you can pair him with like a Theodore or somebody else to activate all poisons on the target. It's not just his poison on a 4-turn cooldown. And Undead Hordes is kind of lacking until you get into the legendaries anyways, so not the worst epic you could pull. Tashada used to be one of the worst epics in the game. Now she's one of the most mediocre champions in the game. She has a single target revive with 40% HP, 40% turn meter, then heals all allies by 15% of their max HP, which is not the worst heal in the game, especially for epic barbarians, but it's nothing to write home about. She does have a triple hitter, but it is random, but it also is guaranteed to put out a big version of Weaken on whoever it hits, so it's not a bad move. We got Barsalis. Still, nobody that I'm a super huge fan of, but he does have a provoke on the A1. And he can put a big version decrease attack if the target's under a fear or true fear, which he does bring and is also immune to, but whenever an ally's HP drops below half health, it has a 50-50 chance of putting a fear out for 1 turn, and whenever an ally is killed, it's got a 75% chance of placing a true fear on all enemies for 1 turn. So it's a pretty good passive. He is a pretty good CC champion if you want to run like a level 1 common champion on your team with a reviver, and then you can just keep letting that common get killed and then put out provokes and decreased attacks on everybody that's also CC'd. So there is a good synergy between the A1 and the passive. His A2 is an AoE that has a 100% chance of putting a big version of heal reduction out for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Also not bad. And then finally, the A3 places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns equal to 30% of their max HP, which I kind of wish it was his because he has a decent base HP for an epic. And then he puts a weak version of strength on all allies for 2 turns. It's a decent survivability kit and increased ally defense and faction crits by 30%. Not the best epic in the game, but he's like a solid B+ epic. He's not bad. We're gonna single pull these primals just to drag out the
2. We got a legendary on our first pull, but it begins, and it's not even that he's a bad champion. I feel like he might be a little bit slept on or overlooked. He's just old, and I already have him, so I'm not like super ecstatic about it, but I'll still show you what he does because he is great for Fire Knight, and he's decent in the arena. But his A1 is triple hitter. Each hit fills the champion's turn meter about 6%, so you're getting 18% of his turn meter back every time he uses the A1, which helps mitigate his really bad speed. Speed's 95, but his attack's decent. 591 based at level 1, 5-star light. I don't remember what it scales up to, but I want to say close to like in the 1400s. The A2 attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of putting a big version decreased defense for 2 turns, and each critical hit fills the champion's storm meter by 10%. So to be up to a 40% turn meter fill off of the A2 or higher in certain areas where you're fighting teams of 5 or 6 like Grim Forest. So that also helps mitigate his low speed. And then the A3, and this is a decently hard-hitting skilled. Attacks one enemy, ignores unkillable, which is very prominent in the meta right now, and shield bust. Builds this champion's turn meter by 30%, so yet again, mitigating that low speed. Builds the turn meter by 60% instead if the target is 50% HP or less after the attack. Also decreases the cooldown of his A2, and this turn both, or skill both, if it kills an enemy, so it can possibly bring it from a 3-turn to a 2-turn cooldown on the A3, and a 3-turn to a 2-turn cooldown on the A2. So he has a lot of increased turn meter. Basically everything he does gives himself turn meter, so it does make his base speed, being 95, not that bad. And then on the passive, increase the champion's speed by 10 and resistance by 50 if the number of champions on this champion's team is equal to or lower than the number of enemies on the enemy team. And this effect always works when fighting bosses, so he is good to put him on a team with, like I said earlier with Barsalis, like a 1-star food common, and then just let them make it to where you are one champion less than the other team, if this is what you're limited to working with legendary wise. So he's not a bad champion, not by any means, and he does hit hard.
Let's move on. We got Runic Warden. Nothing to even speak of. That's a chicken. Abyssal, which is a pretty overlooked rare. I feel like he's probably in the top 20 for rares. His A1 is an AoE, which already makes him good for a stun set. And he has a 30% chance when booked to put in block props on everybody for 2 turns on an AoE A1. So it's not nothing you can rely on, but for an A1, it's not a bad one. His A2 heals all allies by 15% of their max HP on a 3-turn cooldown. A weak heal, but it's still a heal nonetheless. And the A3 puts a 30% increased defense and a 25% increased attack on all allies for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. I wish it was down to a 3-turn cooldown. And he is doing weak versions of everything, but he's doing quite a bit. Every skill he has brings some type of utility. Pretty and be good. Bodboard. Do not like this dude. He has an AoE that puts a big version of decreased defense on everybody, but it's a 4-turn cooldown. And in today's age of champions, a 4-turn cooldown for only a 2-turn decreased defense, it's just not enough on an epic. You need that to be a 3-turn for an epic. 4-turn would be good for a rare. That's like War Maiden level. Smith Flannan, one of my favorite rares in the game, a top 10 rare in the game in my opinion. His A2 is a double hitter, and each hit has a 50% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 5% and a 40% chance of placing the stun. So when he gets booked up, 80% of the time he's going to place a stun, and out of both hits, sometimes both will still and equaling up to 10%, but you're at least going to take 5% of the turn meter away. And if the target's under a decreased speed placed by this champion, it has to be placed by this champion, it decreases the target's turn meter by 10% per hit instead. That's a really good A1 on a rare. The 80% stun chance is what makes that A1 so good. The A2, Shatter Knees, this is pretty interesting. Or not even that interesting, it's just solid. Attacks all enemies, 100% chance of placing a weak version of decreased speed on all enemies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So yeah, I would like it to be strong decreased speed, but even the weak version where it's AoE on a rare is solid, especially considering he's not even a void, he's just force affinity. And then finally, the A3 puts a 25% increased accuracy on all allies for 2 turns, then teams up with a random ally to attack the target. So he's got a mini ally attack with a mini increased accuracy. And then the passive has a 50% chance of granting an extra turn whenever this champion places the decreased speed on 3 or more enemies with their Shattered Knees. And since it books up to 100%, that means pretty much anytime he uses the A2, it's got a 50-50 shot at giving him an extra turn, which is solid. Like that's a solid kit for a rare. Misericord, You could use her in Fire Knight if you're limited on options because she's bringing a counterattack with an increased attack that's already on a double hitter that has a 25% chance per hit, so a 50-50 chance of putting a big version at decreased speed. So you can use her in Fire Knight if you're limited on options. Gnarlhorn, one of the top 15 rares in the game. He's got that AoE provoke on everybody on a 3-turn cooldown, and it puts an increased defense on himself. He brings unkillable for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, and his A1 cannot be strong, critical, or weak, so it's just always consistent damage with an AoE provoke and a 2-turn unkillable and 3-turn cooldown. He is a great rare, and he is the main part of a lot of Phantom Shogun teams in the game. Then you got Seneschal, not the worst champion in the game. He does a little bit for an epic.
Moonstrider is a champion that you can use for the Spirit Affinity dungeon. She has an AoE that has a 95%, no, a lot of them just make it 100, but a 95% chance of placing 100% heal reduction on an enemy with the lowest HP for 2 turns. Now here we do have one of the most slept on rares in the game. She has an AoE that has a 75% chance of putting the big version of decreased speed out for 2 turns. Even if there is nothing else in her kit, that would make her a top 20 rare. The big version of decreased speed on a 3-turn cooldown AoE that's fairly consistent on 75%. That's an epic. Like, even if an epic had that skill, you'd be like, okay, that's all right. So for a rare to have it, that's awesome.
Not even going to talk about her. She is dog water. Now, her I will make a short talk about because she's actually really good for Fire Knight. Ow, I didn't need to zip across it. She has a triple hitter A1 and brings a perfect bell and increased attack, long story short. Shawnee is a very cool champion design. She's definitely a legendary tier aesthetic. She has a good kit for an epic, not great.
Castigator, more like the castrator.
Catacomb Counselor used to be a really good epic. He teams up with 3 random allies to attack a single enemy. He has a triple hitter that heals the champion by 20% of the damage inflicted, and has a 50% chance of placing increased attack on this champion for 2 turns, then attacks one enemy. Keep in mind, he's one of the OG champions, and when he came out, he was really good. There wasn't a lot of ally attacks around, but now he just doesn't hold up.
We got our 3rd moot. What the crap, man? That's our 3rd moot. I mean, that's crazy. That's awesome. We can now 100% one rotation, one shot every single boss in the game.
Because that A3 being a triple hitter that does enemy max HP. That's cool. I mean, everybody knows what New does. You got the triple hitter enemy max HP that decreases our defense by 3% up to 30. He has a triple hitter A1 that puts freeze out and decreases the turn meter by 15% per hit. And then he has a big version decreased attack with the big version weaken on an AoE that also puts counterattack on himself. And when counterattacking, deals full damage, not 75% damage. So, I mean,
that's great. That's awesome. We're gonna screenshot that.
We're looking for a mythical, but that's still cool. 3 nudes. That's so wild to me. Avenger is trash. 2% on legendary. Wow. The fact that we've pulled 2 legendaries out of like 30 on a 2% chance, that should be like 1 out of 50. Pretty good RNG. That probably means we won't get a mythical because of that. Executioner, he's a vulnerable champion. He does hit pretty hard and he is pretty tanky. And he does bring counterattack and a stun. So he's okay for a rare.
Bogoth. A 3rd legendary. Holy cow.
We got Bobald of the Thorn. He's a decent shot. I don't have him. We finally got a legendary that I don't have. But I see him used on teams here and there. His A1, 50% chance to put a provoke for 1 turn. Also heals the ally with the lowest HP by 15% of the damage inflicted. The provoke can be placed even if the attack lands as a weak hit, so affinity does not matter on provoking. An AoE, that is a double hitter that puts a provoke out and then a leech, and also puts a big version of strengthen on himself for 2 turns. The leech and provoke cannot be, well, it can be resisted, but it places even on a weak hit. And then finally, the A3 attacks all enemies. Damage increases 5% per debuff on each enemy. And I don't see a cap on that. So if you've got like 4 or 5 debuffs out on everybody, you could double up your damage pretty easily. Then heals all allies by 20% of the damage inflicted and places a shield on them for 2 turns equal to 20% of the damage inflicted. Which is pretty wild to see like a damage dealer support. There's not a lot of those in the game. We'll probably wind up doing a video on him. Decrease the damage taken by all allies from enemies under a provoke by 15% is the passive, which is also pretty awesome. And then ally HP in all battles by 28%. Small ones. Worst epic in the game, or at least in the argument for worst epic in the game. He does have a pretty cool design. I like his shoulder pads and chest plate. He brings a reflect damage, that's about it. Now, she's a good epic. Kellen the Strike, she hits pretty freaking hard for an epic. Her A1 brings the big version of Weaken. Her A2 is a double hitter that decreases the target's turn meter about 50%, and the second hit puts a big version decreased speed, and then also puts a perfect veil on herself. That's a great skill. It hits hard, takes half their turn meter away, puts a big version of decreased speed on them, and then veils herself. That's a great skill. And then her A3, while it doesn't hit crazy hard base-wise, if there's a bunch of debuffs out, it's a very hard-hitting AoE. And then on the passive, she ignores all shield buffs when attacking under a perfect veil. That mythical skill tone, though. Signia of the High Shield, not a big fan, even though if any of y'all play Dark Souls, she looks like the Onion Man's daughter, Siegfried. But Siegfried in this game is already that amazing PvP mythical. Doing the Runic, he's essentially the epic version of Ultimate Death Knight. He's incredibly tanky. He puts a taunt and a big version strengthen and a counter attack on himself for 2 turns. His A2 is a decently hard-hitting AoE that puts a shield on all allies equal to 15% of his max HP, and his max HP scales insanely high for an epic. Then increases the duration of all allies by 1 turn. And his A1 has a 60% chance of removing a random debuff from all allies. So, really simple, but really good kit, and it makes them kind of act like, because of the taunt and the strengthen, like a mini Ultimate Death Knight, and the shields. We got our mythical, guys. Lazarius 2.0. We already have Lazarius, but she's one of the best champions in the game. Like, hands down, look at these ratings for Arena Faction Wars. One of the best champions in the game.
For A1, puts a shield buff on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns, and the shield is proportional to her exact. For A2 is an AoE that puts a block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns, and then decreasing the duration of all buffs and all enemies by 2 turns, then puts a block buff on all enemies for 2 turns. The 8th rate deals the turn meter of all allies by 20%, then decrease the turn meter of all enemies by 20%. Puts a 50% increased stack and a 25% strength on all allies for 2 turns. Here's one, the best. It definitely top 5 passives on the entire game on 3-turn cooldown. To destroy the champion turn, put to private veil bot and 50% increase enter C on herself for 2 turns. Also, this shipping receives 3% less damage for every 750 attack. They have stacked it up to 30%, so 7,500 attack is pretty much worker damage mitigation ins, but that means you can, if you wanted to use her as a damage dealer, which you'll see why in her second form, you can mitigate a third of the damage. And then the crazy form. At the end of this champion's turn, Ridigo renem ally with 50% HP and 50% turn mirror, then put the perfect down the Rabata ally 2 turns. Has no skill, just revise, symbiote, well, he retreat on nothing, what to do, stop it out, then die Riga. And then, one of the Bisors and aim increase high speed, no health and play Avexen. In order to want her past why you would build her with high time. It's because they are at her second form. It's a double air with a 2x multiplier on the attack. And the AoE is a 3.4 occupier. Loss 3.4 times 140.15 living ally. So that can get to light. A second array X multiplier on the Asian. Very good attack. Array 3 is a dough eater at 2.0, so a top 1 on attack fight. Not the craziest multipliers in the game, but with their base attack being 1597, 5x multiplier is really good. And then in all she does, check out A1. A Touring Heist, the first increase at this champion's attack with 3% stacking to 30. A Sportman to land fun. The second entity frees 4% of the target's cat defense, or destroys 3% of the target's max HP depending on their time, stacking up to 30%. It doesn't work against support cap-ins, so that's a little bit sad. Whether the attack nuke or defense nuke or an HP motor, you're taking 3% of whatever their nuke sources. For the first 10 turns, capping out 20% on the A1. Very unique A1. HR is an AoE that ignored shields and increased defense sparks before attacking. Flings all buffs when the shapping increases the attack's damage on 15%. Are debuff removed? And no debuffs or removed increases this attack damage by 15% or each ally that instead. So she's known and dodge a debuffs, be new like CC debuffs that will make lure horn. Even a fear you can use this on because it's before attacking a fear technically traitors. After this would go into effect, you get 15% more damage very debuff removed, so you could double your damage fairly easily. Then in bigger fight, the bigger team with Grim City or Hydra, 15 times 5 is still 75% at 175% attack damage. And then the A3, it's on a 4-tour cooldown, which is pretty wild for a mythical considered single target, but it hits like a Mack truck, and it ignored ally protection, strength, and shield, as well as 30% of the target's defense. And before attacking, it stills half in the target's turn meter, and it cannot be resisted. So, yeah, she is, in my opinion, between the passive revive and then the damage and Terminator still in the second form, and her just flat out being led of the best speed lead Terminator manipulation champions in the game with 20% fill, 20% decrease on enemies, with a big version increase attack and strength, and she is in the top 5 mythicals in the game in an opinion.
Having a duplicate of her, I don't know if we want to make 2 of her for a tag team or if we want to empower her into herself. We're going to have to think on that a little bit. But I'm happy with that. Because even if we empower her into herself, she is my main speed lead. And I don't even have enough speed to really call her a true speed lead because the highest I can hit is 406. But I'm still happy with that. I think we're going to end the video there. Let's claim our relic fragments. Actually, let's see if we have any relics to make. Let's make our relics first, and then I guess we'll call it quits after that. We got a food relic. We got the Gilded Dragonstone, which is a pretty good, just in general, overall relic to throw on a champion that's you need to be a little bit tankier or a defensive, not really a defensive nuker, but like a defensive support, or it could be a nuker, but not your main nuker, because with that you want like the cat's eye or something else that's going to ignore defense. But what it does is it increases the defense of the wearer by 1% each time they receive damage, stacking up to 10%. But it levels up to like 20 or 25%, which is nice. Let's do our epic fragments here. Unholy Grail. Alright, now the big boy. We're at least going to get a legendary. That's probably what we will get. Another Thunderbolt Spear. Man, is that like a new relic? Why is that so like hard in the game right now? I pulled it on my free-to-play that I just started last week with that Pellets event. And I pulled 2 or 3 of them on this account in the last couple of days. And we pulled one on the main free-to-play. I would have rather got the Oculus Custodian. But at least having that crit damage is the first primary stat on it. You can always use it on a damage dealer just because of that alone. And it's got good gem slots. Anywho, regardless, guys, hope y'all have a good night. I hope this was a somewhat entertaining video to watch. Maybe you've learned something, maybe you didn't. And as they all say, like and subscribe, and as always,